Hello, and welcome to the Donner Party Mountain Runners webinar series. My name is Chris Cloyd, and I'm joined today by the members of the modern day Forlorn Hope Expedition. Ladies and gentlemen, how are you today?
Excellent. Thank you, Chris.
Great.
Thank you guys for being here. It's really great to be able to share this story and to talk with you all. For those of you that are listening, we're talking about the Forlorn Hope Expedition. I'm going to let these guys introduce the nuts and bolts of this much better than I could be capable of, given their experiences and the amount of study and research they've put into this. But it's rooted in the Donner Party, and our run club, as all of you know, is the Donner Party Mountain Runners. So we're particularly excited to honor the legacies of these men and women as best we can. We try to do so through our club events and values, and we try to pass that on as best we can, and this is part of it. I didn't know much about the Forlorn Hope Expedition, despite living on Donner Lake, despite going to the museum, despite being a founding board member of the Donner Party Mountain Runners. I did not know much until you guys started putting this project together. Bob, I'm going to ask you, since you're the one on the center of my screen, and if I'm mistaken, forgive me, but this was sort of an idea between you and Tim from the start?
That's right. Yep. About 7 years ago, Tim and I have passions shared across lots of things, including trail running, but also we like historical fiction. We consume many books a year and go on runs and talk about the books, and then we trade the books with each other. And one of the books we came upon was from 2009, which was Daniel James Brown, Under Different Stars Above. And we'd both read it independently, because we both read Boys in the Boat. I think Tim read Boys in the Boat, and my wife read it, and he said, "Hey, you ought to read this book. I didn't think it would be any good, but it's incredible." We read it, and then that led us to Under Different Stars Above, and Tim and I read it and went, "Wow, this is such a good book." And what's really cool is it's in our own backyard. How amazing. And that really started the genesis of the simple concept of let's go run the Forlorn Hope where they went. Let's go find the map and go do it for fun, fast pack it. And that was it. It was pretty simple, and Tim can pick it up from there.
Well, it's funny. I ran into somebody, that's just running before this podcast. I ran into somebody that's on the city council in Auburn. They've been in around town forever, and said the same thing. They said, I always knew about the Donner Party. I had no idea about the Forlorn Hope, right? I said, well, they went right through town, north of town on Wolf Road at Highway 49. How can, and these guys they've had family in town since 1850. And so that's kind of what caught us on the story, was who doesn't know about Donner Lake or Donner Pass or Donner Peak or Donner Party Porty at 50-50. We've all been there, but what about the Forlorn Hope? So when I read that part as being an endurance runner and a backcountry person, I think all of us, Jen and Elke the same, we spend a lot of time not just running. We spend a lot of time hiking and exploring and trying things. And, if you haven't been in the North Fork yet, well, that's a real fun place to go explore. So it was just kind of a natural fit. Once we finished reading the book, we just started talking about, well, why don't we just go figure this out? There's got to be a trail to follow. And then, everything kind of led to other things, and we ended up here.
It's delightful that you guys did. I know I've enjoyed learning a lot more personally. Jen and Elke, welcome to you as well. I didn't get a chance to introduce everybody at the start, but welcome, and I'm really excited to hear about you girls' experience in this process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
I want to start kind of talking. You guys you guys have led your conversation with a huge slant toward empathy and trying to connect with the men and women involved with the Donner Party and the Forlorn Hope Expedition. With an emphasis on the Forlorn Hope Expedition, of course, but you went so far to create so much empathy with these men and women. Can you talk about how your mindset going into this as a running project kind of shifted as the project went on?
You want me to go first, Elke?
Yeah. Sure, go right ahead.
I'll talk only because I was astounded by the fact that I knew nothing about the Forlorn Hope, even though I'd read some of the same books that Bob and Tim are talking about. It didn't register with me that their wrong turn had resulted in the journey. So for me, everything was through the lens of the members of the Forlorn Hope. And I had really never had an experience of doing something like an expedition for historical figures before. And it completely changed everything. And I think I've said in podcasts before, it changed how I feel about being in the North Fork. I feel like I have friends out there now. I feel a kinship with their spirits and with the land that's completely changed the way I view the Sierras. So I felt pretty friendly with the Sierras before this, but now I feel like I have friends and almost people caring for me and guiding me in a way that I've only ever felt about my sister who passed and my parents. So it's really a neat feeling, and I'm really hoping other people try it. So, and I'm sure Elke has more to add to that.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. Absolutely. It's funny because just going back to last weekend, I came out to Truckee to spend the New Year's weekend, and I will never look at Interstate 80 the same way again. I could not stop looking to the north, to the path that we took, and have it have an entire new meaning to me. I mean, it's not so much about we went here and we went there, but it's more like the Forlorn Hope went here and they went there, and all the things they went through. And I just keep reliving that in my head over and over and over again. And let's see, it was 2017, Tim loaned me The Indifferent Stars Above. So I was familiar with it from that angle, but it didn't really quite register even when I read The Indifferent Stars Above, just how important the Forlorn Hope was to the survival of the Donner Party, until I accepted the invitation from Jen to join this group and really started diving into it. And even more as each day passes, I can't get over what heroes the Forlorn Hope were to the Donner Party. It's phenomenal.
Absolutely. Being acquainted with the story through your project and this experience, it's been what a wild group of individuals. Just to touch on the introduction, for those of you, I assume if you're watching this webinar now, after so many days have passed since you guys finished your expedition, most folks are acquainted. But to introduce you all, Bob, Tim, Jen, and Elke, you guys all decided to recreate the original Forlorn Hope expedition of 1846, excuse me, 1846-47. And to do this project, you guys all came together at different times and kind of banded together with the idea to honor these men and women and to retrace their steps. You guys all live down in the foothills area, to my understanding, and there's so many trails that have this significance around here: the Emigrant Trail, the Western States, the Pony Express. Have you looked at the stories of these other trails during this process, or have you thought about it since the end of your expedition?
Well, to be truthful and fair, for Tim and I, when we kind of read the book and then started to discover that there wasn't a map of Forlorn Hope and nobody knew where they went, we had a decision point at that point, which is to say, let's drop this because there's no map and nothing to follow. So let's go find another trail, in Auburn or whatever. There's lots of them, as you said, Chris. Or maybe we pursue this. And it was kind of like scratching, paint off the wall. It was just a little bit, or a treasure hunt. It's like a little bit deeper. And next thing you know, we're like 40 feet deep in this hole. And I remember numerous times Tim and I would kind of come out of the hole and go, what are we doing? And by that point, we were, being good trail runners, right? There's no going back. So it was only down deeper and deeper we went. And then we kind of relieved ourselves of the pressure and just enjoyed the journey, of learning how to do proper academic research and learning how to be good, diligent historians, and how to do field research and field survey and trail survey and field discovery. These are all disciplines that people hell of a lot more experienced and smarter than we are knew how to do. And luckily we partnered with good, the Donner Summit Historical Society. They were kind enough to give their time and their energy and their effort to help us learn how to do this. It's like learning a foreign language. So yeah, we did look at other trails, But this one really, for all those reasons, kind of caught our eye. But we'll say that, you know, what we call this now historical history trail trekking, you know, HTT. So putting history together with trekking or trail running. Boy, Tim and I are already starting to exchange the emails and books. We're already digging in on the next books. Like, okay, you know, oh boy, here we go. So we definitely are interested in more and having other people do it. I mean, it's not exclusive to these 4 people. I mean, people all over the world have neat, cool trails in their own backyards. And I was thinking, where I grew up in New York, I knew nothing about my hometown. And then just the other day, I had to do some research about it. And I realized I know nothing about where I spent the first 17 years of my life. I need to study my hometown. And all of a sudden, I was just like Elke said, you can't go up 80 anymore without these goggles that we have on. I can't research anymore without saying, well, what's the history of all this? And it's really a good thing.
We're going to have a new quiz for all the Donner Party mountain runner people that want to join. If they can't answer all the questions, you know, up to 80% correct, then they have to go do their homework and reapply.
Yeah.
It is funny though, you know, one of the things you mentioned there was really important that Bob and I think Jen and Elke have traveled the same path. Was what originally started out as we're reading this book and we want to try to figure out what the Forlorn Hope went. And the longer we did it, it turned into something else. It turned into, okay, the trail's interesting, but the people are more interesting, and the people that know more about the people that are more interesting. So working with the historical societies and talking to guys like Bill up at the Donner Summit Historical Society has been really a joy for us to meet some new people and to lean these guys. The other thing that I did once we found this trail, right? It's the Truckee River route, really, the trail that went from the middle of Nevada to Johnson's Ranch, which has been documented by the Emigrant Trails West guys, right? And they have the little T markers out there all the way. There's 71 of them from the middle of Nevada out to Johnson's Ranch. And they have several other trails in California that are marked in the same way. So I've started collecting those books. That's kind of my, you know, where we started is, okay, let's figure out where this Truckee Trail route, because it's semi-marked. You know, you can kind of follow about every 5 or 6 miles or so. There's a marker, but you still got to know how to find the markers. It's not, you know, every one of them's like right next to the road. And so that's been kind of fun. It's kind of almost like a mini geocache, you know, scavenger hunt. And there's other trails all around there. There's the Beckworth Trail, the Carson Trail, the Applegate Trail, all the other trails that the immigrants use through California and Nevada that, you know, kind of fall right in line with this.
That's remarkable. I encourage everybody that's listening now, if you haven't, to go check out some friends of ours podcasts, the Mile 99 guys and girls, the Trail Runner Nation podcast, and forgive me if there's other resources. Of course, there's your guys' website. There's so much information about your expedition that I don't want folks to drive past. But I'm excited. You know, Donner Party Mountain Runners is a running club. I'm excited to talk about some of these trails, and so many of the trails you just mentioned, Tim, I don't know about as familiar as most, particularly folks like you guys that live down closer to those trails. A listener, David Stryker, question from a listener named David Stryker, was curious about some of the trails that you use. Now that you've explored them, can you guys talk about whether they're public accessible, most of them, all of them? You know, how can folks engage with these trails on their own as runners?
Yeah, the particular trail that we followed, and we defined 2 trails, what we think is the historical trail that the Forlorn Hope actually followed. And then we followed what we call the expedition trail, which is a deviation about 85% on the Forlorn Hope trail, but we had to go around man-made obstacles, you know, reservoirs and buildings and private land. So we couldn't follow the Forlorn Hope's track, what we believe it to be their track completely. It's not an easy thing to do because there is no trail, first of all. There is now. I mean, there's a GPS, but we encounter a lot of private land and a lot of obstacles that we had to spend a considerable amount of time getting permission to go through. And in some cases, we've removed those maps or taken them down, not because we don't love people and want people to do it, but because we respect the landowners. And they gave us the privilege of crossing their land once, but they're not interested in having, you know, a big party through it. So it's a tough thing. This particular track, there's pieces of it that people can do. And maybe what we should do as a good idea, Chris, is publish the parts, the segments that you can go on that are public, and maybe we'll do that. I think it's a great idea. It wouldn't be hard for us to figure that out. That way, at least people can take off pieces and go experience, a small portion of what we did.
And
I think there'd be a lot of interest.
maybe we could host it, maybe we could host something like coming through the North Fork or something like that, a day of going Sawtooth Ridge, Burnett to Sawtooth Ridge, through the North Fork, through Iowa Hill, and just see how that goes, go into the East Side Colfax. That could be a Donner Party mountain runner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Bar sampler, right, Jen?
Yeah, that's right. Little trial size. Yeah.
Oh.
There's actually, we found out through trial and error when one of the first segments Bob and I scouted out was an area called 6 Mile Valley. It goes between Lake Valley Road near Yuba Gap and goes over to what we have called the wrong turn, right? It's famously known as just wrong turn because this is where they made their terrible turn. And we did that in the snow in the spring. There was, 4 or 5 feet of snow, no big deal, right? We're on top of the snow, just cruising along, got over to the wrong turn and turned around, went back. So it took us, like 4 hours. We were doing it in March. It was beautiful. Well, one of the other guys from the Historical Society went in the fall when there wasn't any snow, and it's, waist high whitethorn, no trail, ruined his pants, we owe him a pair of pants. But we ran into the same thing. And what was really a nice trail, when there's 5-6 feet of snow on it, it's gorgeous. I mean, just super nice. Take your snowshoes and, your dog and have fun. And then we got in there with 3 inches or 4 inches of snow on top of maybe another foot that was on the ground. It was absolutely miserable. So note to self, if you want to go do 6 Mile Valley, do it in the wintertime after you get about a really good dump of snow. It's a lot more fun that way, and you won't ruin your clothes.
Good to know. We'll try to link with you guys and get some notes. If you do release those segments, we'll make sure that we link them through the DPMR channel so that some of our members can get involved. Big thanks to David who solicited that question. Please know if you're listening, you can solicit questions in the chat. I'll do my best. We'll do our best. Jen and Elke, you were we established that you guys all live down there, and talking about repeating some of these segments. Have you been out to repeat any of the segments since you guys finished, just on a casual Sunday trot?
I have. Elke, did you go and do a new segment? Because I have been out there twice now.
Not yet. It is because now I'm training to do the TRT in a winter, as a winter trek. But so I probably will be. I will wait for a little bit more snow to fall, because I would love to revisit 6 Mile Valley in a much less miserable way. But hey, I haven't done it yet.
You guys carried little cards for each of the members to make sure that was something that was on your minds as you guys went through this expedition. As you guys consider repeating segments or just furthering this Forlorn Hope kind of movement, if you will, that you guys are a part of, have you guys thought about trying to add formal historical markers or education placards along this route?
It would be fun to I know Bob's interested, and Tim, they're interested in educational piece, and I've had such fun time with my 4th grader working with this class. Today we talked about the Forlorn Hope again, and working with kids to really see a real life modern day rendition of something they read about in school, and be able to show them pictures of how we camped, and Elke's pictures of how she made a snow cave and things like that. That's been really fun for me. So I could see that as a historical marker, but I think the main part that Bob, you can add to this, is that on Johnson Ranch, there is nothing there where the adobe house once stood. And I know there are many people like Bill Holmes who would love to see a state park or a real place that kids and adults can go to honor the Forlorn Hope out by Johnson Ranch, but it's private property. So.
Yeah, that's right. Jen's right. I think we have to dance between the fact that this trail and many others that people will discover, are there, and there's historical evidence of it. But unfortunately, not unfortunately, just the fact is it goes through private land in many cases, and people are have different opinions as to whether they want to, highlight that fact. And so that's always a conversation that has to occur. It's always an obstacle, et cetera. But there is plenty of these kinds of trails that are on public land. And I think that's what we should focus on. Doing it 100%, that's hard to do, but doing pieces of it where it's in collaboration with the landowner, hopefully a public or private cooperation, and doing the kinds of things both for children and for adults, where we can go out and teach a little bit of history and do a little bit of recreating and see the beautiful scenery. Those are the kinds of troikas, right, that we'd really like to work on in phase 2.
Yeah, and even some of the documents that we've come into just recently, even after the trek, we found that there was some efforts back in the 70s to try to get the Immigrant Trail going by several members. If you live in Auburn, you can't not know Wendell Roby, right? He's one of the guys that started the Tevis Cup in the Western States 100-mile run, and he was in the process of trying to get a lot of the Immigrant Trail marked and protected, but it kind of fell through, and now it just gets increasingly hard because it goes through a lot of private parcels.
Of course. Well, again, you guys are kind of, you guys are contributing to this rise in the idea of historical trail trekking. And I think it's, especially in a time and place where there aren't as many traditional events as we as ultra runners are accustomed to, it's something cool that people can throw themselves at, that's maybe not as beholden to fitness or, all the other podcasts we've done have been with athletes who have set FKTs this year. And the idea of your project and being able to take it to other trails and other projects should be inspiring to people, because you can do this. This isn't about speed. This isn't about anything other than experiencing that trifecta that you talked about, Bob. And the camaraderie of, you guys got 4 of you together on such a unique project. That kind of stuff is still available to folks.
And what's been kind of a nice blend of this project, right, was a lot of these historical guys like Bill O. We call Bill O. the guy at Donner Summit. His last name's a little tricky to pronounce, so we just call him Bill O. And Bill H. was the guy at Johnson's Ranch. And Bill H. is actually working on a project now to get Johnson Ranch protected, which is be a beautiful thing, right? And this project obviously highlighted that a little bit. But what was fun is that, they see us as a bunch of mutants, right? Guys that run in the mountains, and get lost and love being in the hardest thing. And then we look at them and go, God, I wish we knew all the information that you guys know. And so this blend of, the one thing that had never been done on something like this is really feet on the ground in some of these really remote areas. And that was perfect for us. We love going out there. And so those guys would always want to hey, where'd you guys go today? And what did it look like? And what did you think? And then well, here's what we saw. And this is what we think happened. This is where they went. And then they get all geeked up and they're looking at the maps. And if there's pieces that they can do, and again, a lot of these guys are even older than we are, it was kind of this perfect blend of these historian guys love this stuff. And this was kind of a little bit of a re-energization or re-energy of the Donner story, the Forlorn Hope story, Donner Summit, the whole discussion around that. So it was kind of a really nice blend of things we like to do with things they like to do. And we've kind of found this middle ground that's been really kind of a great synergy between the two groups.
That's so cool.
To add to that, I will say that their energy really was, wind beneath my wings, because I felt like a lot of, not only to honor the Forlorn Hope, but also the historians that have contributed so much to this. It was great to see their enthusiasm, and they were out there along the way. But yeah, doing it for them as well. They were very excited about it.
You girls had a unique position, being the women to join this this expedition, the modern day expedition, and honor the women involved in the original expedition. I would love to know your thoughts on those women. I would love to. You girls jumped in late. Obviously, you guys have been planning this, Bob. You said 7 years. Girls, you had weeks. The Forlorn Hope women had no time. This was a rapid fire. How do I save my family? Can you talk about how that mindset and your introduction to this kind of contributed to your experience?
Yeah, I'll go. I think that for me, as a mom of 3 kids, I have a 10, a 15, and a 17-year-old, which I know that was the age of a lot of the kids on the trip. And the women who did this were age 17 to 21, I believe, or 23 was the oldest woman on the trip. So we're talking very young women. They had made a almost 1,000-mile cross-country journey to this point with babies and toddlers. So whether they were a mom of a baby or they were an older sister, they often had 5 to 7 siblings to care for. So that's how I grew up. I'm one of 9 kids. I know how that goes. And so for me, to put myself in the mindset of a child of a large family, you're given the responsibilities of a mom, whether you are one or not, quite early in life. And I think that the process of picking which people went on the snowshoe trip was probably really excruciating for both the moms and the dads. If I had to pick which of my kids I was going to send out into the unknown, into the mountains, and which of the kids I was going to keep with me to help me with the babies, that would be a really difficult process. And if one of them died in the mountains, I would think that was my fault. And if one of them died while staying with me, I would think that was my fault. So the part of picking your daughters to go, whether they were moms or your daughter, the fact that a dad went, Franklin Graves, with his 2 daughters and a son-in-law and a 10-year-old son, must have been a really hard thing for those parents to talk about. So I have a lot of processing to do with that, because it's easy to gloss over and say, wow, they had a really tough time, whether they were stuck in a snow cave with starving children or on this incredibly hard endurance trek. I think that as a mom, I'd like to explore that in a book club or in a running club with people and really experience what that must have felt like. But that's, it's a really complicated issue. And because I'm fairly new to the project, I'm still processing a lot of that. And that's why I go out there a lot alone. And I also bring my kids with me. I've been bringing my children and their friends out to the parts of Lost Turn that I can access to have them see how they feel about it, because it helps me understand better. So it's kind of something anyone can do, is take your kids out there and just see how they work in the landscape.
I agree. And, I agree with everything Jen just said. Also, as everyone probably knows, or maybe they don't know, but 5 of the participants in Forlorn Hope were women, and all 5 survived. 3 of them had children that they left behind back at the lake. And, to get myself into their mindset and how, number one, motivated they must have been as a result of that, knowing that, first of all, they were burdening other women to care for their children while their children were starved. They had to choose. Well, they didn't have to choose, but it was difficult to feed all of the children, I would imagine. But just getting into their mindset of those 3 women who did leave children behind, that additional will to survive, if there could be an additional will to survive, had to have been very profound for them.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I personally can't imagine. Yeah, it's remarkable.
It was really great to have those guys bring those perspectives in, because Bob and I had some discussions, about, the leadership of the bunch, right? If Stanton was leading and he'd the only one who knew where he was going, and then he was the first one to perish out there near Cascade Lakes or Yuba Bottoms. And now you're basically leaderless. But what other conversations were going on amongst the people or the people in the group saying, oh, okay, who's going to lead? Who's going to make the decisions now? You know how hard it must have been for those guys to go all the way across the country and just get to Donner Lake with all the things that were happening, and, conflict between the families. And there was a murder in there and other things that were going on where they banished people because, they'd done bad things and sent them off. And now you've got 15 people that are, slowly falling apart, and how those discussions in those days must have been just grueling discussions about how to proceed.
Yeah, you can go to your Forlorn Hope Expedition website, those of you listening, to learn more about the party in detail. There are 17 individuals. There's tons to learn. Each of them with a remarkable story, and as you men and women have attested, it's remarkable. I personally am interested. I believe on the Trail Runner Nation podcast, there was some mention of Charles Stanton, and somebody said I could talk about him all day. I don't want to diminish the other men and women on this expedition, but I found his story riveting.
Yeah, so I'll take that's a softball for me. And
I think you had Stanton's card, didn't you, Bob? Or Eddie's? Yeah.
So, well, the simple story is that Charles Stanton was part of the Donner Party coming across from Independence, Missouri. They actually came from Springfield, then Independence, and then on their way over. And as they took the Hastings cutoff, which was supposed to be a shortcut, turned out to be three plus weeks longer, they began to run out of provisions. They started to do the math and say, we're not going to make it unless we get more provisions. And so they said, somebody needs to go to Sutter's Fort ahead, tell Sutter, we'll pay him when we get there, but give us more provisions and bring it back. And so one of the people that volunteered to do that, along with a guy named McCutcheon, was Charles Stanton. He's a bachelor coachmaker from the Midwest. And off he went on horseback with McCutcheon, and he successfully made it to Sutter Fort. And John Sutter said, no problem. And he gave him provisions, and they brought a bunch of mules and provisions back and met the Donner Party outside of Truckee and said, here you go, good news, things are pretty clear. We got a little bit of time here, but we need to, we kind of need to get going because we're at the back end of all the pioneers making their way to California. So, but no worries. And with him came two Native Americans, Miwoks, that John Sutter had. It's not clear whether they're indentured slaves or hired help. That is to be determined. But somewhere in the midst of that, Luis and Salvador, Miwok Indians, came along with Stanton. And so he had all these mules, and he had the provisions, and he had these two guides. And there they were. And then Stanton, as they got to the lake, said, we need to pick it up. There's snow on the mountains. We need to get up and over. And he led 3 of the 4 attempts to try to get up and over Donner Pass. So imagine now the guy had gone all the way over to Sutter's Fort, come all the way back, brought the provisions with Luis and Salvador, and then made 3 attempts to lead the groups over the pass, which is an arduous task. And they failed on 3 of them. And the 4th one, he actually got up and over and into Norden Valley. And they got buried in snow and they couldn't move the mules. And he said, look, I've promised Sutter I'd bring both Luis and Salvador back and his mules, all 6 of them. And since I can't get the mules to go, we're going to go back, even though they'd made it. And so back they went, and then they got slammed with the snowstorm there. Those mules, by the way, all got buried in snow, and most of them weren't found even for food. So that was a foiled attempt. And then his 5th attempt, or his 6th, if you count the one that he made it, was with the Forlorn Hope, and he was the leader. So here's a bachelor with no family members whatsoever, who has now made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 summits of the pass. And in his 6th summit, he's leading these 15 people, and unfortunately gets snowblind, is exhausted, and by the 6th day could go no further. And rather than letting them know that he wasn't going to make it, he knew. He sat by a tree one morning, and they left. And as they're leaving, said, aren't you coming? He said, I'll be along. And he, pulled out his pipe and his tobacco, and he sat next to a tree and said, don't worry, I'll be along. He knew damn well he was going to die, and he didn't want to burden them with that. And so he died peacefully, never to be seen again. They found his body later in the relief parties. And he had done everything humanly possible to try to help the Donner Party. Now, unfortunately, without him, and without his knowledge of how to get back to Sutter's Fort, the 2 young Indian who spoke very little English had never seen going in that direction, the path, and they'd never seen it in the snow. So they were left with the burden of trying to find a way, and it was almost impossible. So in their defense, he ended up passing the baton to them, and they really didn't know where they were going. And so thus began this horrible situation where, in addition to all the starving and all the terrible weather and all the cold and all the freezing and all the frostbite and all the hypothermia and all the starving, in addition to all that, emotionally, they had no idea where they were going.
That's remarkable. Again, there's so much information about all these men and women involved in the original expedition. Do any of you have a little more information on the Miwok involvement? I've heard so much about so many other members. Is there much known about the Miwok boys? Anybody?
We're hoping to work on that piece. I know Tim and Bob went to the Mighty Museum, which is a different tribe, of course, but went to talk to them about Bear River and settlements and where the settlements might have been in those years in order to recreate where the Forlorn Hope might have stopped and gotten help with the acorn bread. But that's a big piece of the puzzle. And I think we have some historians who are willing to help us work on that. But that's an unknown right now, as far as I know.
Yeah, I actually had a long call today with someone that has in the past been in touch with someone from the Nisenan tribe. And Nisen's one of the southern sects of the Maidu tribe, which were the settlements along the Bear River that the Forlorn Hope discovered, and then they were kind of handed down from settlement to settlement all the way to Johnson's Ranch. And this person shared with me that they had met someone that had confirmed that there is a sustained oral history of the Forlorn Hope story through the tribe. Now, of course, all of the Nissen, all the Native Americans maintained their history through oral tradition. And if those people perish and they haven't handed it down to the next generation, the story goes with them. And we had thought, because of the genocide and the cholera that took care of the large majority of the Nissen tribe, that it may have been lost. I was really encouraged today, and our team doesn't even know this, to hear that there may be one or two individuals that have the oral history. And I can't tell you how much I jumped out of my chair when I heard this to say, put us in touch, because we will sit like children on the ground for hours ready to listen to this story, and it needs to be told. So fingers crossed that we can make that connection.
That gives me goosebumps, Bob. That's awesome.
Yeah, and that's a tough dig, right? I mean, that's one of the places we started doing homework on, and we really didn't, it's a real hard one. You got to really go back to some of these tribes and the elders of the tribes to get that information. It's not going to fall out of a book or any kind of reference. We looked at all the references that they gave to us and led down, and we really didn't get any. We got some information, obviously. We made that part of the map from the information that we had on the settlements along the Bear River and where they were located and whatnot. But as far as any firsthand knowledge of what was going on with the Forlorn, it just wasn't written down any place that we could find in the time that we spent on it. So I'm glad. Yeah, same thing, Bob. Let's get going. This is sounding really good. It's one piece of the story we haven't quite finished yet.
And I feel like because we met some new ancestors from the McGlashan family, which was Amanda McGlashan, she was one of the young women, and from the Graves family, I'm interested in finding out their families' oral stories about the women, because I don't know a lot about their role, but I did read in some of the books that both William Eddy and William Foster, who were the only two men, left alive. So we're talking 5 women, 2 men, and they kept saying that the women took care of them the whole time. And they used, old-fashioned language, but they said the women seemed to have a reserve of energy that they just couldn't muster. So I'm interested in hearing what those families know from their descendants. Did they take care of the men? How did they know how to do survival things in the mountains? They hadn't really been taught that as Midwesterners. So I'm interested if there's more information on the women.
Yeah, I think that it sounds like there's some exciting leads in a number of directions based on your comment, Bob. I also know that listening to a number of conversations with all 4 of you, you guys have heard from so many members of these families that have reached out to you over the weeks and months since this project started. I'm sure that's a huge wellspring of information, being able to talk to the descendants of these families.
It has been one of the many things we didn't anticipate, which this whole project, I think Tim and I used the word, let it come to us. So again, it was very innocently just, let's find the map and go do it for fun. That's the truth. There's nothing more scientific about it. And here we are. So we let these things come to us, just like the conversation we had today, or I had today on behalf of the team regarding the potential connection of an oral history. These are things that we can try as hard as we want to make things happen, but they're better off just coming to us. And we won't have time today, but we have shared so many stories and want to share so many more about what happened to us along the way, things that we didn't expect. And you can call them spiritual, or you can call them karma, or you can call them coincidence, or you can call them us making it up if you think we are. We're not. But these are things that are meaningful in the living in the present and paying attention to these things. And so this kind of conversation is exactly what we like, which is it goes in a lot of different directions, and that's fine. And some of it is something is in our wheelhouse, if you will, and other things aren't. Then that's fine. We're willing to say that and say, but let's get other people involved. So that's the whole point of history trail trekking, is it opens up all these doors, and it makes it available to a lot of other people. And I think that's if there's anything we can give, back out of this, it's the notion that pay attention sort of to what we already have in our own backyards, one, and two, there's so many more aspects, or so many more layers of something, even just a simple trail. And where did it come from? Who built this trail? And who takes care of it? I mean, who owns this trail? Who's on this trail? I mean, just the simplest of things. And I think it can lead to a more meaningful time when we're out there, together or alone.
That was wonderfully well said.
Yeah. I mean, even just Bob coming down from Iowa Hill to the North Fork, looking at all the historical infrastructure on that trail, really wondering who built that trail. That was a really cool trail.
It's only been there 170 years. Yeah, it's been around a while. Yeah, I just gotta add on just what Bob said. That's been one of the rewarding parts of this project. And maybe we are just lucky enough to be able to retell this story at a time when we can, gather information from a lot of people. I don't know if the Donner Party story has ever been told, over Facebook or a website or something like this. Obviously, we used a lot of website, Dan Rosen's and Kristen Johnson's websites to get a lot of the information we had. There's a lot of, great websites, but the connection to the past has been just humbling and exciting at the same time, to think we're reaching back to McGlashan, wrote the original book on the Donner Party. Daniel James Brown has touched base a couple of times with us. The Graves family, the Eddy family, all these people just saying, hey, this is really cool, has been really, something we never expected, for sure.
It seems like the whole project has gotten quite a bit bigger than initially dreamed up. Can you talk about how much of this you foresaw, how much you're excited to ride the wave and kind of share these stories and watch this kind of resonate and vibrate at even larger scales?
Well, I'm sitting here typing to Doug McGlashan, who's on the text. I mean, Doug's one of the family members that Jennifer mentioned. The night before we left, we had the privilege of having, jeepers, Doug, I don't know how many of the family members. There had to be 3 generations, maybe 4 of the McGlashan family. And if those of you don't know, the Donner Party running group will know, but C.F. McGlashan wrote the preeminent first book about the history of the Donner Party in 1878, 79. He's from Truckee, not from Truckee, but he moved to Truckee. He was a journalist, and he saw the opportunity to try to tell the Donner Party story from them. So he literally contacted all the survivors and interviewed each one of them and gave them an opportunity to tell the story their way. And it was an honorable thing to do, very arduous thing. And he did it in 6 months, which was amazing. Published the book, and that began to rewrite the narrative about who the Donner Party was, a very important thing. And so anyways, his descendants live in the area, and the Bay Area, and in Seattle. And we were introduced to them through the Historical Society. And the night before we left, we had the opportunity to have a Zoom call with them, private Zoom call, where all of them came on and wished us well. And we're talking 3 or 4 generations of McGlashans who, it still tears me up, because it tears Tim and I up, because when we first started reading, of course, CF's book was one of the very first books we read. And to be in contact and literally speaking to direct descendants of someone like that, it's very moving for all of us. So we've all of us have people have reached out to Jennifer and to Elke and to Tim and to me that are family members, direct descendants of the Forlorn Hope, maybe rescue parties, and heartfelt gratefulness for sort of reviving, if you will, the story, but in a way that's more joyful and more inspirational versus Donner is one of the rare things in history, right, wrong, or indifferent, where if you Google Donner Party and you match it up against pop culture, so could be superstars from music or from the movies or from sports, or even George Washington or World War II or Gettysburg or whatever. You can pick historical topics or pop topics. The Donner Party will hold its own with Justin Bieber and Winston Churchill and all the rest. And why? Well, we know why. We know what people associate with the Donner Party. I'm not going to say it. We know what it is. Our hope is that we can help change the narrative, because there was one guy at the California Star in 1847 that wrote an article about the Donner Party that was ghoulish. And that spread across America. And that's what people believed the Donner Party was. It was a story of ghouls and horror and awful things. And those poor people had to live the rest of their lives with that hanging over them. And then all of their generations past that. One guy decided he was going to sell a bunch of newspapers because he's going to tell the story in a way that sold newspapers. Well, it's been 174 years, going on 175 this year, and we're bound and determined to retell that story. And it's not a story of ghouls. It's a story of American heroes and pioneers that we stand on their shoulders today. And if we can do anything, it's to retell the story in the way that's truthful. And the McClatchins are one of the groups that have been incredibly helpful in trying to encourage us to do that.
I noticed a question on the Zoom call where someone asked if we could elaborate a little more on the sense that we're feeling, the spirits that we're feeling when we're out there. And I think it has a lot to do with what Bob just described, which is, I believe that they know that we're trying to explain to people, this is a story that could help you if you're up against a hard thing. This is a story that can help you dig deep. As an ultra runner and someone who's done expeditions my entire life, this story taught me a lot about human reserve. And it taught me that no matter how tough a situation I'm in or ask my children to be in, that we can do it. Because I just feel like this is a story that can teach you a lot about yourself and about how tough we all are. So I think the reason we felt the spirits out there, and someone asked, maybe people want to talk about it like Tim or Bob, but I felt a friendship with them. I didn't feel scared. My first thing I said to Bob was, I'm not scared of anything in the mountains, but I'm scared of ghosts. So how do you feel when you go those places you're telling me about? Am I going to be freaked out when I leave the tent at night, or if I turn around and I'm by myself? He kind of laughed, but I said, that's the only thing I'm scared of is bad ghosts. But when you get to those places, it is such a kind, and you have to respect them. You can't be there for the wrong reasons. But it's such a kind and like a protective feeling. And like I said to Elke, I just went out on Friday by myself, and I started at 1:30 and I ran into Camp of Death, and it took me a long time, and I was there at dark, and I went at dark because I wanted to, and I wanted to be there at that time of day when I felt vulnerable, to see if I would feel nervous or not. And I didn't feel nervous. I felt like I could say to them, is it a good idea for me to keep coming, or should I turn around now? And it was like, you should probably turn around now. And I was like, okay, I'll turn around now. So I came out of there in the pitch dark, but I made myself go to the edge of Burnett Canyon at dark just to be there, to see how it would feel by myself. And it is a protective spirit. So thank you for asking the question. I'm sure that everyone on the team has another experience, but I felt very protected. But I have to be respectful, or else there could be problems.
I just felt peaceful. There were no specific situations, but it felt very, very peaceful. There was never a time where I was uncomfortable. It doesn't matter where you go, doing a lot of the backcountry stuff I do solo in the High Sierra, you never know what went on out there at any given time. Just, we happen to know with the Forlorn Hope group where certain events occurred, but you could be anywhere and be walking through an area that had some type of death event or what have you. And I don't know, being outdoors is just always peaceful to me. I've never had bad vibes out there of any kind, no matter where I've been. It's always just been, this is where I'm meant to be. And I feel like knowing what they had endured throughout their expedition, or their it wasn't an expedition, I'm sorry, their mission to go get help, helped me get through any discomfort that I had out there throughout that 5 days. And I had a little bit, but certainly kept me at peace.
I think one of the things we all felt out there, I don't think there was a time in the 100 miles we were out there to 5 days where, you know, probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 places where I was just crying for no reason, right? I mean, just like you get this point where like when I got onto Johnson's Ranch and the wheel ruts of these wagons, and I was just walking along and tears were coming down my face. Like, I better go ahead here, you guys. I'm gonna have a moment. Same thing. It's more. I see it more of as a respectful thing and reverence when we were out there. I mean, every time I go out there, and I think Jen said it best on the news thing. She said, I know why they kept going. I understand the why part. You know, these women were out there trying to save their families and whatnot, but how they did it. Every time I go out there, I just get more respectful and more appreciation for how difficult it was for them to continue. And then I just like, wow, I just shake my head again and go. When I read In Different Stars, Franklin, I was about the same age as Franklin Graves when he left at Donner Lake. So it was kind of a kinship there for me. I was in my late 50s. He was in his late 50s. He was the grandpa of the group, right? Everyone else was in their 30s or lower. And he was the guy that, you know, fashioned the snowshoes, him and Stanton, to get him over the hump. But, you know, I just kind of felt that kindred spirit of, here's this old guy who's, you know, probably knows he's not going to make it, and he's going to do whatever it takes to get him as far as he can, and then he's going to hand it off to the rest of his family and have them proceed. But there's several places out there where it was very emotional and reverent, I think, for me.
Well, I think that's a testament to what all of you men and women brought on your expedition to honor the men and women of the original expedition. You guys went in with this sense of honor and respect. And of course, those men and women, as we've touched on, were of the highest character, of a selflessness that I can't know. And it, knowing that you men and women brought that attitude to their spirits, I think creates a peaceful environment, and at least one of sharing the authentic human experience. Yeah, you touched on it, and of course, again, I want to always circle back to the fact that this is a Donner Party Mountain Runners chat, and we are runners. You men and women did this with 2020, the best equipment we could find. You did have support, from my understanding. You mentioned it, all of you. I can't believe how they did it with no technical apparel, bad blankets, and not much else.
Yeah, Toby had asked, did we have backup food and equipment? The answer is yes. So each evening, we were meeting our very small support group in a van, and they had our sleeping bags in our tent. So we were camping outside and cooking outside and doing that, but we were not carrying all of our provisions for 5 days, to be clear. And that was hard enough and incredibly helpful. And when we got soaking wet and freezing cold, and some snow and wet rain and cold rain, and everything we had on our bodies was soaking wet, and we had it over the fire steaming, trying to dry it before morning, we had a tiny appreciation for the fact that they had the clothes that were on their body, which was wool, and they had boots, which were not hiking boots, on their feet, which fit into homemade snowshoes. And then each were given a blanket, an extra wool blanket, and some had a little bit of a backpack, all right, a home, kind of a leather backpack. It was not clear they had any trekking poles. Some of them may have made or fashioned a pole to pull with, and that's it. And they had strips of meat, which essentially amounted to about 600 calories a day, and they had taken about 6 days of provisions. So they had 3,600 calories on their body, and they thought it would take 6 to 8 days, and they got lost, and it took 33. They starved 4 times for a period of 4 to 6 days each over the period of the 33 days. So it is impossible for us to know or appreciate what they went through. Truly. I mean, yes, we are endurance athletes. Yes, we have voluntarily put ourselves in positions where we have drained the tank and found ourselves at the bottom. But that can't even begin to compare to what we imagine they experienced. And so all we can say is it was really hard for us, knowing exactly where we're going, having all the luxuries of all the modern technologies, and having each other as a team that worked together. No squabbles, no issues. They had none of that. And so it makes it all the more amazing to us as to how they did this. The will to survive is probably one of the greatest instincts in the human being. And part of our, what do we do next and where do we go? Part of it is continuing to pursue the study of that, because as runners, as ultra runners, as mountain adventurers, of course, that fascinates us, right? But it's fascinating as all humans is that will to survive, and it is different between men and women, and it is different between people that have others to live for and those that have just themselves to live for. And all of those things in science and medical and experiences are for future, research.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah, the one thing that I've thought about this a little bit, that you read a lot of these survival type stories, right? And Bob's a big fan of Shackleton and these other things. And the one thing that I always thought separated some of these guys was they didn't really sign up for this, right? I mean, a lot of these survival stories, the Shackletons, or, if one of my favorite narrative nonfiction books is In the Kingdom of Ice by Hampton Sides, about this expedition that tries to sail through the polar ice and they get stuck. But these guys didn't sign up for that. I mean, they're just pioneers. They're going west. And now all of a sudden they're thrown into this, hey guys, you need to go hike 100 miles through the mountains in the snow to go save your families. Who wants to sign up? And it's like, well, no, that wasn't really what was in the plan. And then to think that these people are just normal Midwest farmers, and now all of a sudden they've got to go on this trek. Even we were kind of comparing, when we get into a long race and you get that last 10-20% of the race, you're kind of just putting one foot in front of the other, right? You're kind of been stripped down to the bare emotions, and it's just pretty much raw, going forward. And but that's what we signed up for, right? I mean, we get into a race like that. Bob's done the Tahoe 200. The last probably 50 miles is kind of a slog, but that's he paid money and signed up and was gone. But these guys, that wasn't the case. These were just common folk that ended up at this place that just put them in history that it's continued today, 175 years later.
Yeah, it's a testament to human
Like, what's interesting about that, Tim, is that it's kind of like what we're faced with today, where we're all mad because we're in this situation with COVID where we're up against something we've never seen, and there are no good choices. Should you see your family? Wait, no, that's bad. Then you're doing something dangerous. Should you stay isolated in your house and go mental? We're faced with no good choices in this current time, and we get mad about it, and we get self-pitying, and we get raw. But that's what these people had. They had no good choices. Stay at the lake and die, or head out into the mountains and die. There's your choices. Like, go ahead and have a sob story if you want to, but you have to pick one. You're either going to stay here and die slowly, or go out there and die by walking. And that's what's remarkable, is that there is something they can teach us, right? There's a lesson to be learned. Sometimes you have no good choices in life, and life's not fair, and it sucks. And who do you want to be? Do you want to be a hero, or do you want to be that person that just crawled back in the snow cave and felt sorry for themselves and didn't take care of anyone?
I can certainly relate personally to being one of those people who would have begged to go. I would have absolutely begged to go.
Would the rest of you, Jen, Tim, and Bob, would you have begged to go?
Yeah.
Depending on which kids there were to care for. I love to move, but I could see myself offering to stay and take care of multiple children if I felt that was something other people couldn't handle. I think I would choose whichever one I thought was harder for myself.
I think if I had to weigh where would I be most useful, it would be to go get help.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
I think I'm there too.
Yeah, there's another question, from Jacques about starting fires. An interesting thing, how did they start fires? They obviously had to have fires every night because they had, as we said, the wool on their back and a blanket. So without fire at night, and remember, with the Sierra, of course, we all know, all good Donner Party members know, sometimes it rains, sometimes it snows, sometimes it rains and snows. And when it rains, it's cold. And so there's a difference between being soaked to the bone with wet and then getting cold versus having snow that falls off you and it's kind of pleasant. You can knock it off you and keep going. Well, they had their fair share of both. And so they were getting to camp at night and they were frozen, and they were frozen literally to the bone. So fire was a big deal. They had a fire every night with one caveat we'll come back to. And they built platforms. So interestingly, they had an axe and they would chop to get to a place that was flat. They could accommodate 15 people. And they would build a platform that built up the actual fire itself so that it wouldn't melt down through the snow. Because remember, they're building fires on top of 3, 4, 5, 6, 15 feet. If you build a fire right on the snow, it's going to melt right down into a hole. So they build a platform up, and then they use kindling knives and created kindling and flint to start the fire. And all was good. And they found as dry wood as they could possibly get, but they were building bonfires. They were building huge fires that had to be tended all night. So they had to take turns to monitor these fires. At the Camp of Death, unfortunately, they lost the top of their axe head in the snow. And at that point, everything was so soaking wet, they couldn't get a fire going. And for 36 hours, they devised a way to stay warm under the blankets, which was devised by a guy named William Eddy. And then they finally found a tiny little piece of clothing on one of Pike's clothing on her, just inside, which enough cotton to just get something going. And they'd strike and finally got it going and rebuilt the fire at Camp of Death, which is where they were for 5 or 6 hours. But fire was critical. If they had not been able to build fire, there's no possible way they could have survived.
I have hard enough time with wood stoves at ski huts, you know.
We were trying to do the math on how many hours they had to make camp. So you had to get to camp. Then all of you who are tired and exhausted and starving have to spread out, find all the wood. They're 20 feet up in the air, so they're not exactly getting a lot of underbrush and things that are hanging off trees. They're way up high on trees. You know, they're at mature trunk level. So I just kept marveling, if I was up there, how am I going to make a fire when I have no axe and I have wet wood and I have and I'm so tired. So they probably had to do that all in the daytime and then get enough wood so that they wouldn't have to go out all night because it's pitch dark. So I don't know how they did it every night.
Yeah.
Teamwork.
It's a lot. It's a lot of movement. It's a lot of energy output when you're starving.
Elke just chimed in with the word teamwork, and I can't think of any word more appropriate. I wanted to ask you four, I've heard so much about the expedition you just concluded. What's next for you four as a team? Let's start there. Elke, since you brought it up, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Oh gosh, I think I would let Bob take this because there's more to follow up from what we did and we'll be doing that as a team to wrap this all together to what Bob's vision of what that's going to look like will be. So probably Bob would be as a team, what comes next?
Well, certainly as it pertains to this expedition, we want to properly tell the story, share the story of the Forlorn Hope and the members of the Forlorn Hope in the best light possible to the broadest audience possible. So we're examining, various ways to do that. Nothing conclusive yet, but certainly all doors open. And as we said earlier, we kind of let these things flow to us. So we're not trying to force anything. If something comes of that, that's great. But meanwhile, we'll keep ourselves busy trying to figure out the kinds of things that we talked about tonight, whether it's hosting runs or get-togethers for folks or turning our website into more of an educational site for children and for adults. And then when COVID lifts, being able to go out and if people are interested in seeing segments of the trail, I think all four of us individually and collectively would absolutely be honored to host those kinds of things in conjunction with your club and with the historical societies who are remarkable people. So it's all those kinds of things that I think is just helping people, if they want to, appreciate what's here, and then down the road, who knows what this team can and will do. I think we all have a lot of energy and desire, and this has opened a lot of eyes and ears and doors for us, and I think we'll let that too kind of flow over us and figure out what we'll do next. But I can assure you one thing: it's going to be fun. This is a wonderful group of people that we had the privilege to pull together, and we're not going to let go of that anytime soon.
That's tremendous. As a spokesman for the Donner Party Mountain Runners, I know that I can communicate how much we empathize with rewriting a narrative on a group of people. We carry the words "indomitable, unafraid" with us on all of our gear and all of our runs, and rewriting the stories of these men and women of such high character is worth a lot. And I know that we are grateful. And I know that so many people I saw in the chat, kids doing projects at school. It's just tremendous. And I, for one, look forward to following the next steps. For those listening, where would be the best resources to learn more, follow more, and stay involved with the next chapter?
Forlornhope.org is the website, and there's a tremendous amount of resource there. And then if you want to kind of follow on with the conversation on a weekly basis, then go to Facebook and just type in Forlorn Hope Expedition, and you'll find our group. And it's a private group, but you solicit your interest in joining, and unless you're a troll.
Yeah, I don't think we turned too many people away yet. Yeah.
Yeah, I know we'll look forward to linking to all of your site and your Facebook page on our Donner Party Mountain Runners show notes. So many folks have chimed in asking how they can get involved and how they'd love to follow up with you. Those resources will be made available to all of our listeners through those channels on DPMR and on forlornhope.org. Thank all four of you, men and women, for your time and energy and your generosity of spirit.
Thank you.
For having
Thanks,
us.
guys. Thanks for having us. Yeah.
Again, just a really special time with you guys, and we admire your club greatly, and the fact that you pay tribute to this wonderful group of people. So thank you.
That's very kind of you to say. We're all doing our best, and I can assure you, if it gets all of us connected on a human level around trail running, all of our work is worth something.
Amen.